It's not 5 o'clock, and they don't care. Welcome to Wine to 5. Entertainment, education, and everyday drinking for everyday people. Your hosts are Valerie Caruso and Stephanie Davis, two wine educators who don't need a clock to know when to pour that next glass.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Val, podcasting from Colorado Springs, and sitting across from me via Skype is Steph, and she is in Fort Collins. We're both in Colorado, and we're both in our natural habitats, bringing you a mashed up episode to mix things up, and we're celebrating.
Yeah, celebrating our 150th episode. So cheers, Val.
Yes, cheers. Let's get into this. This is going to be a fun one. Clink.
Yes. So get ready, everybody. We have a burning wine question we are answering, drinking some pink bubbles and telling you all about that. And there's a few more surprises, too.
So we've switched it up a bit, and we're giving you the burning wine question segment first to introduce what's in our glasses, because the question is from David, and he asks, what is your favorite rosé cava?
Well, I didn't really have a favorite rosé cava when I saw the burning wine question, and so that was my chance to go buy a bunch of rosé cava. I went locally and went to 2 different liquor stores. I got 6 bottles, but I thought I would have found more, but I actually just bought every single one I could find. And made an excuse to drink some pink bubbly from Spain. But, David went to the trouble, so I thought I would go to the trouble. And my favorite one of all 6, and it ended up being Janet's favorite, too, because she came over to help me out. She felt bad that I had 6 bottles open, So yeah. It is the Poema Cava Brut Rosé. And people may have seen this one. It's inexpensive. It runs about $13. But one of the reasons why Janet and I both really liked it over all of the other ones was because even after all of the bubbles disappeared, and it really was just now a still rosé wine, it was very delicious in a different form. I thought, this is still quite lovely. And we went back through and kind of tasted all of the wines many, many times, and we liked that one the best. We also tried one other one that I do want to mention called Mercat, Mercat. And even though it says it's a rosé cava, it really was its own animal. It was not like any of the other bottles, and so we kind of treated it as its own thing. It didn't have the color or the flavor or the nose or, anything really the same other than it was bubbly. And so we liked that one a lot. We just didn't think it would be something we would recommend if somebody had a rosé cava in mind. I thought it was more of like because it had some of those yeasty, toasty notes and not a lot of the upfront fruit or berry notes and for rosé that you're expecting. And so I thought it was just a nice aperitif or alternative to champagne. It was very nice, maybe with some oysters or something. But tell us, what is your favorite? And let's help David out. What's your favorite, Val?
Steph, like anything else, I really don't have a favorite brand, but there is a 100% Pinot Noir Juveilles Camps that is sticking in my mind right now. It's readily available. It's a beautiful presentation. I do like that one. So I frequently buy that brand. And like I said, I like the regular Mercat as well, even though it's not a rosé. But the one I really wanted to dig into was a vintage cava today. Even though it's not a rosé or rosado, which is what they call her, some say rosat, the 2010 Brut Nature Juveilles Camps Réserve de la Familia. This is in my glass, and you can see it's a beautiful gold color.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the 2010. Sorry. I was looking up vintage charts and I looked at 2007 and I thought interesting vintage, but it was actually 2010. Quick factoid on this brand. This one is the one that is actually poured at banquets for Spain's royal family.
Wow.
And This particular wine is made with the three main grapes that we're going to talk about later on today, the Macabeo, the Parellada, and the Xarel-lo. And there is some Chardonnay in here. It's all free-run juice, first press, and hand-harvested grapes. So this is really, really nice, and it's quite special. It's not an expensive bottle. It's about $25.
Yeah, that's good. And that's not rosé, but I mean, that sounds like the right thing to do. If I could find that. I don't think I have it over here in Fort Collins.
Yeah, this was one of those things that Dirk had, and of course, and I'll go hard or go home. I know you went hard with 6 bottles of rosé. I usually have it in the house, and I was mistaken in thinking I had it, but I was really happy to get to open this one. So it's a special one, and it's worth celebrating because we're celebrating our 150th episode. So
yeah, well, we have to celebrate with bubbly, and so that's also why we decided we should use this as the burning wine question to create not only what we would be drinking in our glasses, but also what we're discussing. And so we wanted to kind of give you guys some information about cava. And so what is it? According to SpanishWines.org, cava has an official definition, quote, a quality sparkling wine produced in a designated region, unquote. They have to be made in the traditional method to be called cava. And like even the bottle that's in front of me, the poema says metodo tradicional. So, it says that, which I think is always helpful for people learning and not knowing what cava is. But otherwise, they are just, if they're not made in that way, they're vino espumosos, or sparkling wines. The word cava means cave, C-A-V-E, and while it does come from specified areas of Spain, it does refer more to a style, which was one of the things I thought was kind of cool because of all the DOs in Spain. They're a regional DO, and cava is a stylistic DO. But so that's kind of cool. But specifically, not just sparkling, but with this traditional method.
And the thing about cava is there are all different kinds of cava, which we're going to talk about. Most people think it's inexpensive, but there are some premium cava as well. But it actually dates back to the late 1800s. So we're going to go back a couple hundred years and pinpoint the origins of cava in the Catalan Agricultural Institute of San Isidro. And they had 2 sparkling winemakers that were trying to make a wine for the Paris Expo, the 1868 Paris Expo. And back then, they were trying to emulate champagne. Everybody was trying to emulate that sparkling in a glass. But again, you can't call it champagne. They actually eliminated the method champenoise usage of that word. They outlawed it a couple years later. But the Paris Expo was coming and they wanted to make this type of champagne, and they were using traditional grapes of champagne. Think of the Pinot Noir, think of the Chardonnay. And the following year, however, Penedès took a hit from Filox-era. So it was because of this hit from Filox-era. In other words, this was the vine louse that, feeds on the vines and kills the vines. Enter the varieties that were planted to help carve out cava's unique future in the bubbly universe. These are the varieties that were in my glass, the Macabeo, the Parellada, the Xarel-lo, and there's some other ones too that we'll get to. But it should be noted that every year in Penedès, because of these events, because they first made this wine, I believe it was, 1865? Because Filox-era had forced them to address the types of grapes that were being planted. And back then it was a lot of red grapes. There's a lot of red wines that come from this region because you got to think of the Mediterranean climate, but it forced them to start thinking more about different grapes, hardier grapes like the Xarel-lo and the Macabeo, and focus on a quality sparkling wine for which that region is really well known. So it's called the Festa de Filox-era, Fil-Oxera. Bring your bug costumes, because this thing happens the second week in September every year, and people dress up like insects and they party in the streets, and there's like sparklers and all that. So they actually celebrate the devastation of their vineyards in the late 1800s, which I think is hilarious.
I think it's hilarious. I mean, I am smiling ear to ear. I not only think it would be so fun to go to that, but I just admire the they've turned something that, was so negative into something that's so positive for them.
I know, that's like celebrating a divorce because then you met a great guy later. I don't know. That's really awesome. That's the way I look at it. But it was actually
totally.
But it was actually in the 1950s and the 1960s where more sparkling wine regulation was enacted and refined, and this included the production of classic method, tank, and carbonated wines. Again, these are the vino espumosos that we talked about earlier. But in 1959, the name Cava came onto the scene as a style of wine. And that's pretty much the first time we saw it being used in reference to wine. But in 1972, the newly created Consejo Regulador de los Vinos Espumosos, the governing body for sparkling wine production, gave Cava its own set of production rules. And the main purpose of this was to distinguish it from Champagne, because the Champagne region was a region and everybody calls sparkling wine Champagne, and there was a big scuffle over this. So they wanted to be like, you know what? No, we're not doing it. So it's Cava, and it comes from Spain, and it's a unique thing. And so these are the rules, and this is what makes it so. Sign of the cross. Yet it didn't receive its DO, Denomination d'Origine, until 1986, as well as its production zone. So that's when things became a little bit more laid out right before they entered the European Union as well. But in 2016, Cava ushered in the age of the single vineyard classification. We mentioned on the show very, very briefly the Cava de Paraje Calificado, the CPC. So this is kind of like the third Calificado after the Rioja and the Priorato. And what this is, a single vineyard classification, is a very premium level. And we'll talk about what constitutes a CPC.
Yeah, well, and it makes sense because, it's like back in the day, they've got to distinguish, what makes them special. And now they got to make sure that, the different cavas aren't all considered the same either, So I think it's good. I think it's helpful to have some. Now, I mean, some wine rules are kind of like, really, here we go again, but I think, this makes sense. But so back to where Cava comes from. About 95% of it is produced south of Barcelona, as we mentioned in Penedès. However, it can come from the Rioja region. Well, yes. Yes. And it also comes from Castilla y León, Aragon, and Navarra. Maybe even a few other places, I think, too.
Yeah, Valencia.
Right.
Yeah, Extremadura.
That's why it's more of like a style. It can be, instead of just a particular one designated area. So, and there really are a lot of producers, like over 240 making Cava, and only 12, though, are authorized to produce that CPC we just mentioned, the Cava de Paraje Calificado, with 9 actually releasing wines approved for the classification, including the one that Val mentioned, Uve y Camps and Gramona. And so these are like the top of the line, the best cavas, the best bubbly coming out of Spain. And
yes, they actually have to meet a tasting board to be approved. So of the ones that came out, I think 9 producers. Last I checked, late 2017. There may have been some since then, but the last list I saw only had 9 producers on there that submitted wines that were accepted.
That's pretty amazing. And then the native grapes are at the core of this Cava production, which is kind of why they have their own festival and, they've made this big deal about it, and which is also why it's so cool. It's not like you can just get Cava style sparkling out of California, so there, this is what's cool is some of these grapes here, the Macabeo or the Viura, is another name for it, Parellada, and the Zarello. Those are the ones that Val had mentioned earlier. And is there another another name for Zarello? Panza Blanca?
Panza Blanca.
Okay.
Never heard
of that before.
Me neither.
Yeah.
That was a new
there
one.
You go.
Like, there
cheers
you go.
Hey, cheers to that.
Yeah, I guess I didn't consult Jancis this time. I usually consult her wine grapes book, but since we're not having a grape gab,
right.
could just consider most of these grapes are going to have other names.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes it's just a different name because you're just in a different part of the same country and they call it differently,
Yep.
But all of these are the white grapes, and Macabeo is the dominator, with over 35% of the vineyard plantings. Chardonnay is also authorized along with Malvasia. And for the rosé or rosado or rosat, there you go. See, there's all three different names. And even the one in front of me says rosé. And then I thought it said rosat on here too. Sometimes it's pretty interchangeable with a lot of the labeling. But these pink wines are getting their color from Pinot Noir, Garnacha, Monastrell, which is also Mourvèdre, and Trepat. I think two of the ones I had were either 100% Trepat or 80% Trepat, and I had 100% Garnacha of one of the ones I tried too. And we did talk about Trepat in a little factoid, I think, when we had a bubbly banter on episode 109, if you want to check that out or go back and see what else we've bubblied about.
I think we called it tripping on Trepat or something like that. Yeah. So it was a grape gab too, a little bit. No, it wasn't.
I think we gabbed about some other grapes and threw in Trepat.
That's something. What it was. That's what it was. But as we mentioned earlier, it's made in the method, the classic method or traditional method, where the second fermentation happens in the bottle in which it is sold. And the difference between champagne and cava, we always kind of go back to champagne as a baseline for comparison because it's something, I'm not going to say people know, but it's something people are familiar with the term. But of course, what there is to know about champagne is expansive, just like what to know about cava is expansive. It's not just the grapes, the soil, the climate that makes the difference, and the country and the language. The minimum time on lees is very interesting because for non-vintage champagne, the wine has to spend a minimum of 15 months on the leaves. But for cava, both vintage and non-vintage is a minimum of 9 months.
That's a big difference.
That's a big difference. And then cava's minimum alcohol by volume is 10.8% with a max of 12.8%, which is interesting. But for reservas and Grand Reservas, minimum time on leaf is 15 and 30 months respectively. And Grand Reserva cava are vintage dated. But for Cava di Paraje, which we mentioned earlier, or the CPC, Calificado, add that onto the end of it. For Cava di Paraje Calificado, or CPC, the minimum time on lees is 36 months. That's 3 years. That's the same for like vintage champagne. Additionally, this is a single vineyard. This is top quality, single estate, meaning the grapes are grown there. And also what I learned is the vines have to be less than or more than 10 years old. So the vines have to be at least 10 years old. There are yield restrictions. I want to say it's like 8,000. But what I did see was that also to be able to submit a wine for this category, you have to produce at least 85% of your own grapes. You can't buy out your grapes.
Yeah, it sounds like they're really strict, but it's a top-notch product. So
yes, and that's the whole idea behind this. Rosado styles, which was kind of the genesis of this discussion today, they've been making those using what they call the sangrado, or it's like the French saignée, meaning to bleed. So what that is the red grapes will spend an average of 6 to 9 hours macerating on the skins, not to exceed 15 hours. And you got to think about it. If most of the cava producing regions are Mediterranean climate, the weather is going to be a lot warmer. So the maceration is going to happen a lot faster, the coloring of the wine. So while blending of red wines is allowed in champagne, let's say you make a red base wine, it is not permitted in cava. They've got to use the bleeding method or the sangrado method, where in champagne you can take a little bit of just base Pinot and color the wine if you want to make a rosé. As of 2017 September, there were over 167 million bottles produced, with only about 19 million Reserva and just under 2 million Grand Reserva premium bottles. Only a third of those premium bottles are actually exported. It was something like 21 million total, and like 13 or 14 million stayed in their market, which, if I read that correctly on the Regulatory Commission's website. Our burning wine question, however, this is an answer that I could not find that kind of occurred to me while we were kind of poking around looking at what we're going to talk about today, is how much of this production is actually rosado? That we don't know. So inquiring podcasters would like to know if you know how much Cava production is rosé, which I'm guessing probably less than 10% of it. I would guess, but I don't. That's not an educated guess. That's sewage. So semi-estimated wild ass guest estimate. That's what that is.
So that's funny.
Yes. So what about the styles? There are different styles of Cava, which we've kind of alluded to already.
Yes. And I hope that when I'm in Menorca this summer, that I'm going to have some different styles, producers, and all of the above that we've talked about that I haven't tried yet. So maybe because, not more than a third doesn't come to these other countries like the USA, we don't see them. And I only have 6 rosé cavas to choose from in the first place. So let's make that a change this summer for me. But most cavas are non-vintage, and most of what you see, like I said, in the U.S. Are this dry style. I mean, every one that I found was a brut, and which is the dry style. But the brut nature and extra brut production has increased over the years, so people want that dry style. And the CPC that we were talking about, that new special elevated category, can only be made brut, extra brut, and brut nature. But like champagne, there is some similar categories as far as stylistic characteristics, with sweeter ones labeled secco, semi-secco, and dulce. They're rare, and you just don't see them as much because that's not really where the drinkers are putting their money. So dry styles are popular, and that's what you're going to see most of the time. You can get some single varietal cavas. One of the ones I tried was, like, you can have Zorello 100%, Macabeo, or Trepat, but there's something super cool that I have never seen before, a Malvasia dessert cava. Whoa.
Yeah, I know. They've got, if you look at the regular, the diocava.es, España is what that means, they have a downloadable decanter. It's like a brochure. It's a PDF that is so absolutely gorgeous. And there are so many different kinds of, and that's where you see the picture of the insects partying. But you'll see all these different cava bottles that are just, they're not even like big sparkling wine bottles. Some of them are just ridiculous, like straight angle bottles, or just really weird shaped bottles, different kinds of grapes. You'll find some of those single varietal wines. That's where I saw those, different price points, all this information, way more information than we can jam at you in this show, but
way more. We
will link that up for you guys, because that's where I learned about this Malvasia dessert cava wine, I believe. And hashtag W25 challenge, because I want to try that.
If I find some, I'm bringing it home for you when I'm in Spain.
Oh, yay. That would be awesome. But did we talk about the everyday cava wines? Usually about $15.
Well, like what all of the wines that I bought and tasted were between $8 and like $13. So there's a lot of choices, that are everyday kind of drinking, and you shouldn't feel guilty when you open more than one like I did. But there's also those vintage bottles and prestige bottlings, that are going to run you, $100, $200. So there are choices out there. It just really depends on where you live and what kind of selection you have. But, and also where you live on what you can order online.
Yeah. Apparently from the UK, you are in business, because all of these different styles, and they give you the merchants and places like that. So apparently in the UK, you can get some really cool cava.
Yeah, that's the place to be. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we should kind of sum this up with a storing and serving little bit, because I wanted to go back to this whole vintage, non-vintage thing. And this has come up a couple of times recently, and I wanted to cover it in the show, is that it's not just sparkling wine that can be labeled non-vintage. But because we are talking about sparkling, and so often that's what you see when you see NV, which means non-vintage, and you're kind of going, really, are we going over this? Well, yeah, because even though it might be benign and simplistic, here's the thing. If it says non-vintage, how do you know how old that wine is on the inside of that bottle, right? How long has the retailer been hanging on to that bottle? Or if you've had that bottle out of sight, out of mind, how long have you had that bottle? Whether it's champagne or cava or some still wine. And non-vintage wines really aren't meant to be forgotten about and aged for a long time. These wines are designed to be opened and enjoyed in their youth. They should be fresh and expressive. If you have that in mind when you're shopping and buying cava, then you can, be, I think, more aware of, what's that wine? What should it taste like? And how long can I have it? Or should I give it as a gift to somebody? That kind of a thing. And like when Val's drinking something that's a 2010 vintage dated cava, she can open that in 2018. But I should not be buying a non-vintage bottle and opening it, 8 years later. So that's kind of what I wanted to make sure people realize, that because even Val and I had a still wine from New York recently that was non-vintage, and it was old. And, it's like there's no way to know how old that wine was. So that's just the point I wanted to make. And then also, cava, just like champagne or prosecco or any other sparkling wine, should be served at 45 degrees Fahrenheit or around 7 degrees Celsius. And if you didn't know, really the fastest way to chill those bottles is to put it in a ice water bath. Yep. Instead of using your fridge and like checking it a million times and it's still not being cold, or throwing it in the freezer, putting it in an ice bath that has to have water in it is the key. But it works really quickly. In like 20 minutes or less, you have a cold bottle of bubbly, or, what if you're chilling
actually,
white wine.
If you add salt to that water, it helps really the ice melt and form around the bottle a little faster.
Yeah. It changes the freezing point.
Yes.
And so that is the key, everybody, to that. And then as far as stemware and glassware goes, I kind of was laughing when I was going to write this, because I'm like, this has changed a lot over the years. But nowadays, really anything goes, people. Drink it in whatever glass you want. We are not here to tell you that you have to have cava in a champagne flute or in a champagne coupe or anything like that. I usually try to avoid washing as many dishes, more dishes than I have to. So I'll use the same glass for all of the wines pretty much that I drink. As long as it's tulip shaped, it's pretty universal. But I would say that most often you will still see it if you're at a restaurant, or in most people's homes will be served in a flute.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, flutes are nice and we have some really pretty flutes, but I prefer to be able to stick my nose, get this really weird hazelnut thing I got going on here. But, going back to the vintage, pretty much it's not going to say non-vintage on the bottle. It's just not going to have a year on it.
Right.
It's just, most champagne or most sparkling wine or Prosecco or whatever it is doesn't have a year on it. That's non-vintage. And some people will say, oh, they mean multi-vintage, because those grapes can come from a variety of years. But, if you're curious about when you're supposed to drink these wines, Decanter has some really good resources. Like the producer that I'm drinking right now, the Juve Camps, they make a CPC level wine. It is a 2007. And they've actually got notes on this website to say drink between 2017 and 2021. And it's 100% Xarello, girl.
That sounds cool.
Aged on its lees for 9 flipping years.
Whoa.
I'm freaking out.
Oh my God. That's like a moment of silence we should give that one.
Yes. So this producer, to go back to David's question, yeah, I would say this is one of my favorite producers of rosé cava or cava in general. But there are so
cava.
many.
Yeah,
I have so many I haven't had. This one's readily available. So
nice. And we do have a lot of other resources with links on the blog. So if you're listening and you want to go kind of scoot around and click around and see where we were gathering some information and even just some more information about Spanish wine. Like if we've tickled your fancy and now you're like, you know what? I'd like to know a lot more about Spanish wine in general. So check out the links and have fun with that. I think it's time to move on to our Wino Radar.
I almost feel like we should have called Rick Fisher the Spanish wine guy, and because he's probably listening to this, and we're either going to say something that's going to make him want to throw his phone, or he's going to be like, "Why didn't you call me?"
He's like, "I can answer your burning wine question."
I'll bet you can, Rick.
I bet he can.
I'll bet you can. So, hey, Spanish wine guy, how much of cava production is actually rosé? Please leave us a SpeakPipe message, and we'll play it on the show, and our listeners can hear the answer from the guy, the Spanish wine guy. But on our Wino Radar, we're at episode 150. We're recording right now, and this is pretty special. That's 150 straight weeks.
That's plus some bonus episodes.
That's. I mean, we work at this every single week. Very rarely do we take time off and pre-record like a backlog of episodes. Usually get them within the same week or at least a week out. But 150 episodes means that Steph has created a new cocktail, which I love when she does this. So, Steph, I want you to tell everybody about the cocktail. Tell us what it's called, tell us what it's made with, and tell us what the hell black vodka is.
Okay, cool. Well, the drink, I named it Amuse Me. And what you can't see, I don't have the drink in front of me at the moment, but I did take a picture and you'll see it on the blog. It is a black martini with a black rim. And the color is from the black vodka. And it is Copper Muse Visu black vodka. And it is from a distillery here in Fort Collins called Copper Muse, which was the reason why I called the drink Amuse Me. And it also has some peppermint schnapps, creme de cacao, and simple syrup. And then the black rim is a sugar rim from Savory Spice, which is also in Fort Collins, but it is a chocolate peppermint sugar. And so, you might think that the drink sounds sweet, kind of like a chocolate mint drink. And it does have chocolate mint flavor, although the chocolate is very subtle. The mint comes through, but it's only a small amount. There's 1/4 ounce of creme de cacao, 1/2 ounce of peppermint schnapps, and 1.5 ounces of the vodka. It is a very clean drink, but I think it's kind of like semi-sweet, semi-spicy. Justin thought it had a spiciness to it, almost like one of those intense breath mints, or you know what I mean?
Like the Altoids.
Yeah, it's like it has like kind of a sharpness to it. I think though, when you look at it, the drink looks very mysterious. It is a strong drink because it's all booze. But the name Visu is a French word for vicious. And the bottle has this sexy lady on it. It's a beautiful bottle. You can see the black vodka through the clear glass, and then there is the copper label that makes it very mysterious.
What makes the vodka black?
So it's some FDA approved coloring that they use.
Not like a crazy rare flower from the side of a mountain in Boulder or something like that.
Yeah. No bugs, no flowers.
Okay.
Nothing fancy like that. But yeah, so that was the happy 150th episode cocktail. And I hope that we have amused you for all of these years of podcasting. And Val, I think yours is pretty special. You've got something to throw down here.
Yes. I have a new haiku.
Yay!
It's not 5 o'clock, and we just do not care. Wine25 podcast. I know, it's so obvious. I'm laying in bed. I'm going, there's my haiku. It just seemed right.
Oh my God. I love it. I love it.
So now we'll have to do a
why
video.
haven't we been saying this haiku all along?
I think we have. Just not in the pattern of a haiku.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
So I love the idea of, reciting haikus and drinking martinis as black as my soul.
No, I was like, what am I going to create? And I was looking for inspiration. And in front of the fire, I laid down kind of like in this like yoga move. And I laid down and all of a sudden I was like, wait, there's a local black vodka. Val is going to go apeshit for this.
How does it taste? I mean, is it a pretty clean?
Yeah, it's a clean taste. I had it on its own. It's fun to mix with too, but I had it all by itself. Like you could just, if you are the type of person who likes a straight vodka on the rocks, as I have some friends who just, don't mess around, vodka on the rocks. You can do that with this vodka.
Vodka is something I don't buy. Like we have the Bekarovka, the bison grass, the Polish vodka. And whatever vodka we have is there because I was required to learn clear spirits for the diploma, and I probably haven't drunk any of it since. And one of my buddies gave us a bottle of peppermint vodka. It's got a scratch and sniff label. I don't know. I don't drink it. I just don't drink vodka. So I'm not a big, I prefer a little more interest. Like when I mentioned the soju last week, I want to enjoy what I drink. And I really want something that if I want to just sip a straight clear alcohol, I sip a gin. I like herbals and interest. And most vodka just doesn't do it for me because maybe I drank too much of it in my 20s. I don't know, but
over the years, I've changed my preference to gin from vodka for a lot of the same reasons, but vodka is still such a popular spirit.
It is.
And I think it's because it becomes whatever it is that you want it to be. So that's why people like it. But I mean, you could have a dirty martini with this black vodka, and you throw some olives in it. You can do whatever you want because it's still, even though it looks cool, it doesn't have a flavor. It's not a flavored vodka.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the flavored category is very, very popular, but it's, again, something we don't get into, and we just don't drink a lot. But ironic, we're in a drinking podcast, but we have a shout out.
Yes, from people around the world who are drinking and listening with us.
Yes, we had to scrub the iTunes from around the world because we found it very interesting that we don't get to see the iTunes reviews on the regular US iTunes site. So for a little project I was doing for school, I was kind of doing a little poking around the international iTunes sites, and I found a review for us on iTunes Italy, which I thought was really cool. And this is a fantastic review because I think Gino Bigia laid down what we're trying to do in the show. And the title of it is Fun and Informative. And that's exactly what we want to be. We want to have fun, but we want to give you guys information to chew on. This is my favorite blend of serious (wine geek) information couched in relaxing banter. This is a very clever balance and not easy to achieve. Imperceptibly educational. And Val and Stephanie are two people I'd love to sit and drink a glass of wine with. Great info and great crack. And that was from December of 2016. And I'm sorry, Gino Bigia, that we didn't see this. Mi dispiace tanto. I'm sorry we didn't see this until last week. But grazie. This was so beautiful. And I'm just so excited to have found that little jewel that we put it on our website. So thank you for that awesome 5-star review. But Steph,
yes.
What about the Patreons? What about those patrons out there who are showing us some support and love?
Yes, they are. And thank you so much, our tenacious tasters. We appreciate you. Jeff E. from the award-winning We Like Drinking podcast, Lynn from Savor the Harvest blog, Sebastian of Sassy Italy Tours, Jen in Maryland, David and Lisa in Illinois, Anne Marie in Virginia, and our It's Not 5 o'clock We should be reading the haiku every time for these It's Not 5 o'clock people. And we don't care. They don't care. We don't care. We write haikus about it. Meg in South Dakota, Clay in Arizona, John, Andrew, and Aswani in California, Chantel in Ontario, Mary Lou in Pennsylvania, Kathy in Georgia, who's planning a trip to Italy, Chris and Janet and Diane in Colorado, Steve and Renee in Illinois, Kathy in Tennessee, Ashley in North Carolina, and Sean in Ohio. And our tastemaker listeners, thank you so much to David in Scotland, Carol in Kentucky, Karen in California. And if you are interested in becoming a patron, check out the details on patreon.com/wine25podcast, and you will be entered into our monthly drawing as a patron at the $2 and above level. You will also get exclusive content and swag.
And speaking of the monthly drawing, it is time to draw the name of our February Patreon winner for our surprise gift. And this month, the winner gets to choose between our current pieces of swag. We are getting more, just so you know. But we do have a Govino glass, or we have a t-shirt. We do have limited sizes left, but we are going to be restocking, and we're going to be adding some new things to the collection. So the February winner is... And I redid all the paper because they were getting kind of ratty. So,
because all of your little hand grimies were like on there. You're like, oh, I had some cheese, and now I picked up a little name slip.
Aswani is a longtime podcast supporter, and you are the winner of a Govino glass or a t-shirt. So
we'll contact Aswani and let you know, and then you know what you would like, and we'll confirm your address.
Right. Congratulations, Aswani. We are here for you guys every single week between episodes. You can find us in the social spaces at Wine25. And we encourage you to join our private Facebook group called Wine25 Community. It's crazy up in there. Connect with me. I'm Val. I'm on Twitter at WineGalUnboxed, and as Vino with Val on Facebook, Instagram, and once in a while Pinterest. And Steph, you can find her everywhere online. She is the wine heroine. That does it for this week, everybody, but we'll be back next week with some more fun. So until then, cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Wine to 5 podcast. Be sure to check us out at Facebook/WineTWO5. And tune in next week for more fun and useful sip tips.